just before the video starts, I want to say a big thank you to everyone that's helped on the resources that I've used to actually do this. So that's PS4 Linux, PS4 boot, which is where the bin loader for the PS4 Linux stuff comes from, and the Die and Kill GitHub for their PS4 Linux tutorial. Yeah. Also Modern Warfare for great tutorials, and then also the Flow because, well, without him there will be no jailbreak. Well, yes, you say that anyway. There I also have a lot of resources linked down below that I've used in the course of making this, and you don't need to make the distro yourself. I will leave a link to that in the downloads below. Anyway, enjoy. Alright guys, I'm Luca, and today I'm going to be showing you how to install Ubuntu server on your PS4. So first of all, you want to get these BZ images, and then you want to get the init init RAM FS. I think it's the file system, just the recovery shell, and then obviously a copy of Ubuntu server. I'm using 25.10, and then if you just go on here, you can find what model and what BZ image you should get. And the BZ image basically contains the drivers and that sort of stuff for Linux, and also the kernel that you're using. I have I think it's a 2116A. However, when I used the BZ image that they said to use on the guide, it didn't work for me. So first of all, we want to start off by making a VM. This is for the Ubuntu server to live in. I'm using Vert Manager here. However, you can use VirtualBox, and I'll leave another video in the description where you can follow along there if you're on Windows. It's basically the same process, just follow the commands that I'm putting in. Okay, and then we just want to follow along with the Ubuntu install process. Okay, and now once you signed in after the install process, I would highly recommend doing IP ADA show, ADDR show, and then you can SSH in from a terminal. This is just because you can't copy and paste in the Ubuntu server, and so this will just make your life a lot easier. Yeah, so as you see here, I'm just typing the IP address and the name of the account. Hit type in yes, and then type in the password. Okay, so we're going to start off by just doing update and upgrade. So this gets the list of items that need to be updated, and then upgrade gets, well, it just installs the update or updates, and the -Y just accepts everything, so you don't have to constantly click Y. You see here I sped up lots of parts of the video as well, just because this process took me around about 50 minutes to an hour, and I made a lot of mistakes I cut out, so. Okay, so now we're going to install the packages. So we want the slash at the end just means to go to the next line, and fast fetch isn't required. I just quite like to have it there. And as you see here, I'm going into the bash rc file, but it's not working because of reasons. So I go back over to the machine or the virtual machine, and I just put it at the bottom. And that way, we get the nice Ubuntu sign and all the system information whenever we start a new session. Okay, and then we move on to getting the rest of the system set up. So first of all, we just want to do the network manager and then also the SSH daemon. Make sure that they're enabled, just because it's going to make your life easier. And it's a sanity check really, and then we want to clear the logs and the temp files. Now this is the most important part here, is the machine ID. This is what has been holding me back from posting anything about this. If you don't delete the machine ID, you will boot with errors. It's just a pain in the ass. You input, it doesn't work, and it's just weird. Okay, and now we're on to the process for archiving the distro. This will allow us to unpack the distro and actually install it on the PlayStation. Okay, and now we move over to the PlayStation. We just want to jailbreak it, so I'm using PPP pwn here, just because it's what works on 11, firmware 11. So yeah, we just get through the jailbreak process. It's just a normal process. There we go. Once we are jailbroken, we want to then connect to the Wi-Fi. I already have mine saved. Yeah, because I use the PlayStation sometimes. But yeah, as you can see, all's good there. The files changed. Doesn't matter. It's fine. And now this is not something I was meant to do. I actually shut down the VM. Now I have to boot up a Windows VM here, just because for some reason when you're transferring files, I think it's actually the BZ image specifically, during the FTP process, something goes wrong and you just won't be able to boot. The only way I found was just use Windows. It just works for this occasion. So you want to go onto your PlayStation and just get the IP address. You see here, mine is 0.0.89, and then we want to connect them port 2121, and then we want to make the following directories: dash data, dash linux, dash boot, dash user, dash system, dash boot. And then yeah, so as you see here, we already have the files in there. I didn't want to change them over because I know these ones just work, and you can get the correct intra RAM FS from there. So yeah, you want to make sure you're getting the right South Bridge, and also you want to choose internal, because there's no point in doing this on an external drive unless you're just testing. But yeah, as you can see, I already have the archive on my PC. So I created a new tab here and I connected to the Linux VM, which you can find there by again doing IP ADDR show. and you get the IP address, and then you just want to type in the username and password. I actually got the username wrong here, and then yeah, you'll see a change. You want to accept the SSH certificate keys, whatever it is, and then we want to move the distro from the VM onto your PC. Put this in a place that you'll know. For me, it was just inside my downloads folder, it's another directory. And then we switch from the virtual machine tab over to the PS4, and then we drag and drop onto the PS4. Now this takes a while. I sped this up about 10x speed, I think it is. So yeah, it does just take a bit of time. And then if you already used a Linux distro before, you should go to the -user-home directory and then remove the linux.img file. Just because the recovery shell will then boot into your existing uh, Linux install. Now you want to set the resolution to 1080p and then the RGB range to full, and then disable HDCP. However, the disabling HDCP, it doesn't really matter anymore from what I was reading. Um, so yeah. And now you can either use the payload guest bins that are on there, but you want to make sure you're using the 1 GB of VRAM because you don't need more, especially for running Ubuntu. And now I actually use PS4 boot.free.nf. It just works. Now you want to make sure everything is unplugged from your PlayStation 4, so I have to unplug my controller. And as you see here, I'm praying because you do get some oddities. So as you can see, the photo on the left shows a blue-purple light, that means the kernel's loaded, and then the white shows that it didn't. And also here's just a weird experience I had earlier. Just TTY just stopped working, just flashing, and then I tried to change to the screen, and yeah. And so at this point, I found that my HDMI to USB was working fine, so I used that here to capture this. So you want to type in install-hdd install-linux-hdd 2ds.sh. Yeah, you'll see me typing it in here in a moment. And yeah, some BC images will have different things to type in. And then I chose to allocate a 100 gigabytes here. And then this process also takes a bit of time, so you'll see that I have sped it up. I think it's about 50 times speed. Then once you get over to the end of the then the unpacking, it says install complete. You just want to type in resume-boot, and then you might have to type it in twice or click up on your keyboard twice. And as you can see, I think it's multi-path D, the daemon, whatever. And yeah, if you saw that was the issue with the recovery stuff. However, if it shows up at the bottom, it's fine. You go into recovery mode. However, then you boot straight into Ubuntu server. And now we're going to remove the existing SSH keys. You don't need to do this if you're building the distro by yourself. However, I will have the built distro in the description, just a little download link to it, just because it saves you some time and you only really have to follow like half the steps. This is kind of important because you don't really want people to be able to just SSH into your device. Sure, they need to be on your Wi-Fi, but it's just best practice, I guess, here. And I can't actually type SSH. So yeah, took me a second to realize this one. and yeah, we want to restart the SSH daemon. And then we change the password as well. And here we are using the network manager CLI, which we would have installed with the rest of the packages, to connect to the Wi-Fi. Again, if you do IP addr show, it will show you if you've got Ethernet or WLAN. If you've got WLAN, that means your Wi-Fi is working. And then Eth0, you just need to plug in your Ethernet cable, and that's the only way you're going to find out. And then once you type in your password, it will be covered in asterisks. And you see there, I ping Google, so we're getting a response, and then I reboot the system, and when you reboot, it goes straight back into the place